What is going on, fantasy people? It's your boy John with the catch here to run another mock draft. We've got a 12-man league going on. We've got some PPR as far as scoring standards go. So, very excited to hop right into this and go ahead and run this mock draft. So, I am selecting from position number 6, pick number 6 in the first round. I'm definitely going to be targeting a running back. I'm going to kind of run a different strategy here. I'm going to go RB receiver, QB, RB receiver, tight end. So see if this works out or if it does not. And obviously, that is the strategy I would like to stick to, but some things may happen where there's some players that we just can't pass up, or vice versa. So we will see what happens. We've got your big two off the board, now your big three, and I would probably predict Kamara will be off the board next. There we go. Then we've got Khan, not John, but Khan. The feeling Khan is going to steal a lot of players I want. So he went ahead and selected Nick Chubb. I am going to I'm going to take Zeke here. I do still like Jonathan Taylor, but at the time of recording this podcast, very shortly before, excuse me, not this podcast, but this mock fantasy draft, um, shortly before Carson Wentz, his surgery was announced, and he will miss about 12 weeks. So I do think you're going to see Jonathan Taylor fall a couple draft slots down. But I actually think that, if anything, this unfortunate injury to Carson Wentz, it could actually benefit Jonathan Taylor because in that first half of the season, we know he is going to be fed the football quite a bit. So it's definitely interesting, something that we'll need to start monitoring pretty closely here as the regular season starts to draw closer. But that Colts team is very difficult to analyze fantasy wise. So we've got, after my selection of Ezekiel Elliott, we've got Devontae Adams being the first receiver off the board today. Then we see those next two big running backs, kind of with the question mark right there, right? Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. And then Tyreek Hill as our second receiver off the board. And then Aaron Jones going as the 11th selection overall. So we'll just kind of keep monitoring it as our tight end, our first tight end of the day is taken off the board. No surprise that it is Travis Kelce and Austin Eckler going. So my top running back at this point in the draft, or my top three, as you may know from watching some of my earlier mock drafts, are going to be Najee Harris, who just got selected, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and David Montgomery. Now, like I said, I'm going to be selecting a receiver as my second pick. So I'm very happy that Stephon Diggs is floating around, although I'll be very surprised if he does not get selected before my selection. So that being said, I am monitoring Calvin Ridley. Really, all these guys. Yeah, there goes Stephon Diggs. So a lot of people may disagree with this, but I am very high on DK Metcalf above some of these other big names, including Calvin Ridley, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, and DeAndre Hopkins. Although I really do like all of those receivers, I just feel like DK Metcalf is going to have a huge year. And one of the best things to do, you know, as the your fantasy draft starts to approach, is to trust your gut, and that is what I'm going to do here. I'm a big DK Metcalf fan. I have no problem reaching for him this year. But I also wouldn't have any issue if I ended up with any of these three or four guys as my number one receiver. That being AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Hopkins, and Terry McLaurin as well. So at this point, I will be targeting Patrick Mahomes in the third round. If I can select him with the 30th overall pick, I'm going to feel very good. But if he is not available, then I'm going to either take a swing if Darren Waller is around, or I'm going to revert back to that running back position. So kind of with this strategy, you're drafting a running back, a receiver, then you're trying to shore up the QB position and the tight end position. But like I said, if there's a receiver or running back hanging around that you have very high on your draft board, then you may have to revert to one of those positions. For example, I really like David Montgomery. I would love to pair him with these two players that I've already selected. And I do think that Patrick Mahomes is, someone that may get selected before pick 30. And on top of that, I think there are some other quarterbacks with a lot of value in that same tier with Josh Allen, Lamar, and Kyler Murray. So we will see what happens here with three more picks until I draft again. So a lot of receivers off the board after we selected after we selected DK Metcalf as well as Clyde Edwards-Helaire being the only running back taken. And like I said, no surprise, Patrick Mahomes not lasting till pick 30. I think he will probably go between pick 20 and pick 30 in most leagues, especially in 12-man leagues. If you play in a super flex league, he may go earlier. And there goes Darren Waller. So my top target here is David Montgomery. And like I said, I won't be surprised if Khan starts stealing all the players I want. And if he gets selected, I'm probably just going to go ahead and shore up the quarterback position with either Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. He went with Josh Jacobs, reaching for a. Now, I'm not going to call it a reach. I think some people will. I'm going to go ahead and pick Montgomery. But uh, I like Josh Jacobs a lot this year, and I know that the addition of Kenyon Drake has a lot of people scared of drafting him. But I personally like him a lot. I still think he's going to have a great year. I do think that Kenyon Drake will probably have a pretty good year and get a lot of those touches as well. Definitely going to be a handcuff situation to monitor. But that only, kind of solidifies the selection of David Montgomery, someone who I'm really high on, because Josh Jacobs is someone I've been kind of targeting in later rounds in these mock drafts. And he is someone who I think, as the season draws closer and closer, he won't be, kind of lingering around in the later rounds, round 4 through 6. I do think he's going to be selected much earlier than people are anticipating, and I would argue that James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars may also begin to sneak up. But starting to see a little bit of run on running backs after Jacobs and Montgomery have gone. Now we've got Dobbins and Sanders off the board, and I think they're a good value in round 3 as well. And at this point, I'm definitely going to start targeting that quarterback position as well as the tight end position. Still some pretty good tight ends on the board. Kittle's still sitting around, has not been selected. If you know or have watched any of my videos already, you know that I am huge on TJ Hawkinson, and there goes Kittle. So we may see a little run on tight ends. I won't be surprised if Hawkinson and Andrews and maybe even Pitts are gone. But at that point, I'm going to revert back to selecting Robert Tanyan a little bit later. So let's just kind of monitor who's going off the board. Going to see CeeDee Lamb getting selected in the 3rd round. Chris Carson. We already went over Kittle, then DeAndre Swift, and Amari Cooper. So you're going to see those two Dallas Cowboys wide receivers go pretty early. So my recommendation would be to target Michael Gallup in the late rounds because he's got a pretty good value where you can get him. Robert Woods off the board, someone who I think is of great, great value here in round 4. I mean, pretty much the number one, locked in at the number one receiver for the LA Rams. I do think that Cooper Kupp is going to stay as the number 2 in that offense. But I think both of them are going to have very productive years behind Matt Stafford. And then we see another LA Ram just went off the board, Darrell Henderson, who at the moment is looking like the clear-cut number 1 running back. So pretty good value there, although I'm a little wary of Darrell Henderson. Myles Gaskin is someone else who I would love to see have a good year, and I think he certainly can have a good year, but not someone I'm necessarily targeting. So, like that of the Dallas Cowboys receivers who are going very close to one another, you'll probably more than likely see Godwin and Evans go pretty much back to back. So, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to snag up Josh Allen. I do like all the quarterbacks, in that top tier who are available with Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray. But kind of strategically here, go ahead and take one of those three. And hopefully, between the next couple of picks until I pick again, at least, one or two other quarterbacks may go off the board and kind of help us pick up a tight end that we really like, or at this point, I am going to start looking at some of these receivers like Tyler Lockett and like Adam Thielen, just because I think they present a little bit better overall value as Cooper Cup goes off the board, and I would even consider DJ Moore as well. Mike Davis off the board, someone else who, my typical strategy of loading up at running back, I probably would have been eyeing at this point. And there goes DJ Moore. So I think this round four, consistently has a lot of good fantasy value, whether it be at the receiver position, a couple good running backs as well. And definitely you're going to probably start to see a run on quarterbacks and maybe a continued run on tight ends as well, although that has typically been happening closer to the fifth round. So strategically, like I said, you can kind of, start evaluating your team and start to begin to select a quarterback and tight end. And what that should do is, like I said, start a little run at both of those positions as Mark Andrews gets selected, and that kind of allows some of those other receivers and running backs to kind of get pushed down the board just a little bit, and which could definitely work in your favor as well. So TJ Hawkinson is my top target right now, as we just saw Kyle Pitts go off the board. Although I really do like Adam Thielen with what we saw him do in the red zone last year. So these are my two top targets without a doubt. It's going to depend on, and there goes Adam Thielen. So a little bit of weight lifted off my shoulders, no debate really. I'm just going to go with my top guy there. Like I said, I know that Khan is going to be stealing some players throughout this mock draft that I want, but that is just the way that it goes. So at this point, as we see Kyler Murray get selected, I'm going to go ahead and drop my face down a little bit. So we've definitely, in my opinion, we've got one out and got a number one receiver. We've got two very good running backs who should take a majority of the carries on both their respective teams, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and a tight end who is set up to have a monster year in that abysmal Detroit Lions offense. So I'm pretty happy with this core team. And at this point, I'm just kind of going to start to evaluate anyone and everybody who I think has some upside this coming year. So I will just be building this queue and evaluating one by one who is going off the board. And things are probably going to start going pretty quickly here as we do see some people beginning to exit this draft. James Robinson at this point, with me only having two running backs on my team, is someone who I would be willing to reach for. I'm going to hold off from adding too many players to this queue as I add five people in a row while I'm saying that. But I just want to kind of be able to evaluate who's going, what kind of trends are going on. So, got some upside players beginning to be taken off the board. People are gonna, and like I usually say, these are the rounds that will make or break you. These are the rounds where you just need to stick to your guns, stick to your gut and follow your draft strategy as well. So for me, I would like to pick up another receiver, kind of bounce back to that receiver position. But like I said, I don't have a problem reaching for a guy like James Robinson that I really want when I do see a number of receivers that I like as well. If Deontay Johnson is hanging around by my selection in three picks, he is somebody who, I would definitely target. But with Robbie Anderson and Chase Claypool on the board, as well as Jamar Chase, and a lot of these other names in later rounds who I know that I'm going to be big on, I do believe that the running back position is a little bit more important, even in a PPR league, especially with us riding behind my boy DK Metcalf. So we will see who goes in these next two selections as Kenny Galladay is taken. Drinking a Waterloo today. All right. Chase Edmonds off the board. So I would definitely consider Deontay Johnson, but I think you get a very similar value in Chase Claypool, although I do think Johnson is going to see more targets and probably end up with more receptions. So a good value there, but uh, I'm going to go ahead and reach a little bit for James Robinson, someone who I think will still be very involved in that offense, someone who helped win a lot of fantasy championships last year and really came on in that second half of the season. So I know a lot of people have completely wiped him off the board. Uh, you know, don't believe he's going to be the number one running back, which I understand, but I am always willing to take the the upside kind of gamble with running backs. So not too worried here, as I do see a lot of value at the receiver position. So Robbie Anderson's kind of my top guy out of these receivers. I really do like Jamar Chase. I think he's going to have a pretty good rookie year as well. I'm going to go ahead and move this so we can see he's going off the board. Kind of just a mix, right? In these rounds, you're going to be seeing, a lot of running backs going, a lot of receivers going, and some tight ends and quarterbacks sprinkled in as well. So I'm probably going to be targeting Robbie Anderson, as I said, but I do, I like the value that you can get in Leonard Fournette. I like the value that you can get in Ronald Jones, as we know that one of them is going to be, running the football as the number one running back in that team if they do not go to a two-back split throughout the season, which they probably will. So, you're kind of banking on injury there, but I do like both those running backs and what's going to be a very, very explosive offense. But nonetheless, I do kind of want to stick with this strategy of kind of bouncing back and shoring up each of these spots before adding to the bench and kind of seeing how that works in the end for us. So, Robbie Anderson, someone who I think is going to have a very good year. I'm going to go and switch this to last year's stats as opposed to the projected stats as we see Brady off the board. So, kind of the top guys I would look at here. Definitely Jamar Chase, even Juju, both of these Tampa Bay running backs, Chase Claypool. So you got two Pittsburgh receivers, but I'm going to roll with Robbie Anderson, pair him with DK Metcalf, and we're going to move right along. And I'm going to hope that one of these Tampa Bay running backs slides. I very, I highly doubt that that'll happen as Robert Tonyan goes off the board. I think that's a great selection, great value at the 79th overall pick. But nonetheless, we've got lots and lots of good value left, especially at the receiver position. So I'm going to go ahead and tag up some of these late names that I would like to have on my roster, as we see Ryan Tannehill, as well as Ida Smith Jr. off the board, and the Pittsburgh Steelers look to be the first defense off the board, unless I missed one earlier. We've got 6 picks to our turn as we start to see Jamar Chase and Chase Claypool off the board. And, Chase Claypool is someone who I think presents really good fantasy value. We did see him fall off a little bit towards the end of the year last year, but nonetheless, I think he is going to have a great fantasy season this coming year. So I'm going to go ahead and go back up to the top here as Leonard Fournette just got selected. And I'm going to cross my fingers that Ronald Jones falls to us as the LA Rams are taken off the board. We're going to, kind of hope that the two drafting before us are not, well, okay. There, there it goes out the window, right? I didn't think he was gonna slide to us, but there's definitely a shot, right? So Ronald Jones off the board, and at this point, I am looking at Kenyon Drake as the player that I want the most. I do like Will Fuller a lot here, But the running back position just a little weak on this squad that we've put together. So I'm going to go ahead and probably reach for him. Although I do like the value of Juju as well as Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller here. But I think there's better late round options at the receiver position as opposed to the running back position. So I'm going to go ahead and shore up Kenyon Drake. And barring not wishing for any injury to Josh Jacobs, but if Josh Jacobs has any injuries this year, I think Kenyon Drake is going to have a very productive season. And, barring any injuries, I think that he will still be heavily involved in that offense. So I'm happy with that pick. I know there are a lot of people staying away from Kenyon Drake, but nonetheless, I'm happy with it. And we're going to move right along and start to evaluate who is left. So lots and lots of, at this point, we're seeing some defenses go and lots of receivers, tight ends, and running backs. Kind of been a pause at the quarterback position as we, are kind of approaching round 9 here. We'll just kind of see. There goes San Francisco. 2 picks after the Baltimore Ravens went off the board. James Conner, who I think is a great selection, selected 96 overall. I do think he has, yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty close 50-50 split there in Arizona. I think there was a quote today that Chase Edmonds is the chess piece and uh, excuse me, James Conner is going to be their 4 down running back. So you can kind of interpret that however you want. That was coming from their head coach, if I'm not mistaken. So we see Michael Thomas off the board, someone else who I think is a pretty good value, although you have to understand that you're going to lose him for probably about a month, give or take. So we will see how that Michael Thomas situation plays out. I do think he's going to get selected in just about every league, but he might get dropped early, especially if you play in a 10-man league or less, he may not get drafted, and he may get dropped pretty early as well. So we see a kicker, Harrison Butker being the first, and then Tampa Bay selected. Or excuse me, Justin Tucker would be the first kicker selected, not Harrison Butker. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a shot on Will Fuller. I do think he is a player with a lot of upside who definitely has a shot to be the number one receiver in that offense aside Devontae Parker. So I do understand you're not going to get him the first game of the season, but I think where you're drafting him, and we finally saw him healthy last year, and with what we know he can do as a number one receiver, although he may be behind Tua and not Deshaun Watson, I do think there's a lot of upside with that selection in the 9th round of the draft here. So we're going to go ahead and try and revert back to the running back position. David Johnson's going to be my top guy, as much as I want to stay away from that Texans offense. But then you're kind of just evaluating these handcuff situations and who you like the most. And I'll tell you two guys I like really late, J.D. McKissick as well as Rashad Penny. So I'm going to go and tag them. And I'm actually going to tag Marlon Mack as well, someone who I think may kind of benefit from that Carson Wentz injury. So let's go ahead. Juju is still available, so at this point I'm going to add him to our board. We've got a lot of good receivers left, in my opinion. Really, really no reason as Mike Williams goes off the board. And no reason to panic at that receiver position. Mike Williams is someone who I am seeing going pretty consistently a lot earlier than people are anticipating, and expect that to only get worse and worse as the season draws closer. I've talked about this before. I've talked about it in my late round receiver video. Uh, some of these guys who are getting picked in round 9 and round 8, as these next 2 or 3 weeks go by, they're going to be much higher on draft boards, and if they're not ranked higher, they're going to be selected before their rankings. So I think Mike Williams is going to have a great year. I think that's a great selection, as we see Jerry Jeudy and Juju Smith go off the board. Two other receivers with really good value here at the end of round 9 and round or beginning of round 10 as well. So when we're looking at this team, I think we have a solid QB1, a solid tight end one. We've got two really good running backs in my position, two good running backs, on the flex position and bench who can kind of help shore up if we do see any issues with Zeke or Montgomery. But in my opinion, I don't think we're going to. And then I think we have a great receiver number one. You can note the other receivers who were available when I selected Metcalf. And then I am happy with Robbie Anderson. And I think, Will Fuller is going to have a good year, and we got him at a good value as well. So, one position I'm going to go ahead and check, as I do think that a lot of these players available present kind of equal value. I'm going to go ahead and check the tight end position, and I do see that Mike Gesicki is available. And I actually don't have a problem selecting Mike Gesicki. And I'm actually going to go ahead and do that because I think he's going to have a good year, and I think he would be a great player to pair with that of TJ Hawkinson. And if you do play in a league where you can flex a tight end, which I do personally, I think that is a great 1-2 punch. And I think, like I said, that offers a little bit more value, gives us, kind of that insurance if anything does happen with TJ Hawkinson, that we have a great tight end one to go ahead and plug in as well. And when we're looking at these receivers, I think that there is a lot of similar value as we see both Deebo Samuel, Tyler Boyd, and now Brandon Cooks off the board as well. So don't get me wrong, I think a lot of those receivers are going to be selected, but I would be happy finding it up with Antonio Brown with the receivers we already have on this team. So I'm willing to reach for Mike Gesicki, whether you consider that a reach or not. And I still think we're going to end up with a pretty good overall roster here. So we will go ahead and just kind of anticipate these next couple of auto picks. This was a pretty good live draft for the most part, as we see AB taken off the board, kind of a punch to the gut for me. Kind of the nice thing with this strategy, just kind of bouncing, from running back to receiver to quarterback, tight end, then just bouncing, through the rest of the draft at running back, receiver. I know I did pick a tight end. Is you kind of just get a good mix, and you're not really stressing at any position. Your team is just pretty even overall. So I'm really not worried. I'm just kind of trying to pick, uh, at this point, any running backs and or receivers who I think present the most upside. Starting to see some more kickers off the board. We saw the Colts off the board as well. Colts defense, that is. A couple more running backs and receivers. I think these are all good value at this point in the draft. Would have really liked to snag Antonio Brown. I think he's going to have a good season in terms of PPR leagues. So at this point, I am looking at Jarvis Landry, but I think I'm just going to go ahead. It's kind of a tough decision, right? I'm going to go ahead and snag Jarvis Landry. I did pretty strongly think about selecting Jamal Williams there. And that is the one downside of this kind of draft strategy is I just kind of end up with at least one less running back who I feel strongly about than I'd like. I do think there's a lot of upside with Jamal Williams, but I just don't know how much it is truly there. So at this point, I'm probably going to try and draft Alexander Madison late and, kind of run that handcuff situation. But like I said, I do really like J.D. McKissick and Rashad Penny as some late round values in PPR leagues. So keeping that in mind, I'm probably going to target those guys pretty late. And at this point, I'm just looking at any receivers, I can snag with some upside, like Corey Davis. I'm probably going to stay away from Devontae Parker as I'm already invested in Mike Gesicki and Will Fuller of the Miami Dolphins. Michael Gallup, someone I really like at this point in the draft. Probably going to be staying pretty heavily away from these Colts receivers. Um, we will go ahead and go down the list. I really do like Rashad Bateman. I think his fantasy value is raising day by day. Nelson Aguilar, someone else I am really big on this year, who I think is going to have a pretty productive year with the New England Patriots because someone has to, right? So we'll just kind of sit here and wait. I almost selected Miami's defense with that final or with that last pick as well because I do think that they, you could argue that they prevent, or excuse me, they kind of allow more upside and more value than Jarvis Landry would. But nonetheless, I still think we can snag up a decent defense at the end of this draft and kind of stream through the year. I will say that I do think New Orleans is a little undervalued in these rankings as well as Miami. So someone did go ahead and either had Miami on their queue, or no, it looks like Nino is still drafting, so he did reach. In terms of these rankings, he reached for Miami, but I don't think it's a reach at all. They, on average, had about 143 fantasy points last year as a defense. They do lose Kyle Van Noy there, but I think they're going to have a good year, under Brian Flores as well this coming year. So I like Joe Burrow a lot here. I think he presents really good value. He's someone who, when I'm looking at this roster that I have, that I would consider as a number two running back. Not something I always do. I don't always draft two quarterbacks. Actually, I would say I typically don't, but sometimes I do present more value than anyone else left. So we will see what happens here. And there goes Joe Burrow. Okay. So Jamal Williams, who I considered drafting with my last selection, is still available. Um, but I just don't believe in that Lions offense, right? And I mean, other outside of TJ Hawkinson, at least, I don't believe in that Lions offense, and it makes me very hesitant to draft anyone other than TJ Hawkinson, who I've probably talked about 100 times between all of the videos I've done this past month or so. Uh, and I like this value in Trevor Lawrence as well. So you see Devin Singletary off the board. Go ahead and just double check everything. A lot of receivers that I like. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to stir up this defensive position. Something I usually don't do. But I think that New Orleans, you see it 126 fantasy points last year. They do have a relatively tough schedule, and they may be playing from behind a little bit with those offensive changes. But when I'm looking at my queue, I just see so much value left and pretty equal value at the running back position as well as at the wide receiver position. I almost took Michael Gallup there. I'm going to kind of see if he falls, but I have a bad feeling that these auto picks are going to snag him up. But, I probably could have picked Michael Gallup with that last selection and then hoped that the Saints defense fell through as we're starting to see Cleveland go off the board. Now we're seeing Jamal Williams go off the board. So we'll see what happens, but I do think that there's still some pretty good value left on my queue as well. So let's see. Still got Kirk Cousins available, Latavius Murray, Michael Gallup, Marvin Jones. With Alexander Mattinson, I think he is a great player. But as long as Dalvin Cook is healthy, there's nothing you can do. He's going to be the number one guy there. But, if anything happens to Dalvin Cook, we already know that Alexander Madison is going to be the next guy in line, and he is going to get a lot of touches as well as some work on the receiving end as well. So uh, there always seems to be a guy that gets drafted. Dalvin Cook does deal with injuries pretty often, so you do kind of have that value of letting him ride the bench for a little bit as well. And it goes. Oh, Rashad Penny got picked pretty early. That's someone who, like I said, I was kind of targeting for one of my final selections. So I do think Rashad Penny is going to be involved in that backfield this coming year as we see Michael Gallup go off the board. And, I would actually consider J.D. McKissick my top target here, although I just got done talking about Alexander Mattison. I think that J.D. McKissick's going to see some early involvement with Antonio Gibson, so I will go ahead and snag him up. And then, for my final selection, I'm going to be eyeing a receiver. And then I'm going to keep it true. I'm either going, well, I was going to say I'm going to keep it true and draft a receiver and a kicker, but there may be just enough players here that I like that I may go ahead and just forfeit my kicker, which if you've watched any of my mock drafts, you guys know that I do that, which is something I do in real life. Whether it be at the receiver position, the running back position, I don't mind shoring up another player and then dropping one of them before the season begins and adding a various. There's going to be a lot of kickers left before week one kicks off, so I mean, even there's a lot of good kickers here, right? Ryan Suckup had a good year last year. We've got the Chargers kicker, Matt Prater. I mean, the thing with kickers is they don't have to be on a good football team to produce fantasy wise. Sometimes it actually helps them if they are on a bad team and they're playing from behind. So a lot of people forget about that and just let kickers on not very good teams not get picked up. You see a lot of even numbers for a lot of these kickers. So I think Ryan Suckup would be my top target out of these guys, but he'll probably get selected before this draft is over. But nonetheless, I do not stress about the kicker position. I do understand the value of having a very good kicker on your team, but I think that it can also be accomplished through the waiver wire. So I'll kind of put my team up here. And then on here, we're just going to go ahead and look as Fitzpatrick is off the board. Jared Cook in round 13, I think, is a great value. It looks like our boy Nino has really stuck out this draft, so shout out to you. But I think Jared Cook is going to have a very good year. Over 500 receiving yards last year and 7 touchdowns with the New Orleans Saints, and now we see him on that LA Chargers squad with Justin Herbert, and I think he's going to have a fantastic year. So I am going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and draft Aguilar, although he is ranked far below Rashad Bateman. I would feel I think as the season draws closer, Rashad Bateman is going to be, very, at least in terms of fantasy buzz, he's going to be moved up on a lot of boards. I think he's going to have a good offseason, and I think he's going to have a good rookie year as well. So let's go ahead and just let the draft results kind of be on the flyer and go over this team here. So, like I said, we went out, we picked Ezekiel Elliott in the first round. We bounced back to receiver and got DK Metcalf. Then in the following round, we solidified in the following round, we went ahead and selected a second running back after we saw Patrick Mahomes go off the board. And I think we got two very good number one running backs, a very good number one receiver. I did pick Metcalf over a couple guys that you may have not picked him over, so you can note what receivers were available when I picked them. Then after that, we went ahead and solidified with who many believe is the second best quarterback in this year's fantasy draft with Josh Allen. And then we went out and we selected both TJ Hawkinson at the tight end position. And then we kind of refined the receiver and running back position. I may have reached, in some people's opinion, for James Robinson, but I still like the selection of Robbie Anderson. And then when you look at this bench, Kenyon Drake, Will Fuller, Mike Gesicki, Jarvis Landry, J.D. McKissick, and Nelson Aguilar. So I do really like this bench. I think there's a lot of upside. I think we ended up with two very good tight ends. And we'll just go ahead. We'll look at what kickers are available, and we'll note that could select Rashad Bateman here if I wanted to. And Ryan Succop's available. So like I said, that would be my guy. We'll go ahead and we will add him to this team. So in my opinion, I did reach for the New Orleans Saints defense, and I went and picked a kicker just, because I know a lot of people do want to solidify and actually make those selections in the draft, although I may not always do that. I may pick an extra skilled player or what have you. Last year I uh, totally screwed up at the quarterback position, and with my last selections of the draft, I picked a couple quarterbacks. I did not pick a kicker last year. But that's another story for another day, right? So I think we ended up with a pretty good overall roster. I think just a little bit weak at the running back position. James Robinson or Kenyon Drake really turn out if James Robinson ends up getting more touches there in that backfield. If Kenyon Drake, even gets a 50-50 split, or, we see some injuries to Josh Jacobs. And if JD McKissick gets, a lot of receiving work, in that offense as well. I think that this is a really good fantasy squad moving into the regular season. So pretty happy with this strategy. I've practiced this once or twice, although I still, remain pretty loyal to the heavy RB strategy, going out and selecting three running backs in a row. But hey, as the draft gets nearer, you need to start practicing some of these different strategies and kind of evaluating what you think is going to make you the most confident moving into the regular season. So I will go ahead and cap that mock draft off. I think that this went pretty well. If you did enjoy this, if this was helpful to you in any way whatsoever, please consider subscribing for more future content like this, as well as our regular The Catch podcast, amongst other fantasy content and NFL debate content, as well as smashing that like button and comment down below with what you think of this draft. Was it any good? Was it awful? Do you like this strategy? Any thoughts? Any concerns? Put them in the comments section. We're excited to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we are out.